Amy, welcome to Second Nature.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So we did a intake call, basically a preparation for the TrailCon panel, and during our call, I was like, "We got to have you on the pod. We gotta expand this conversation. Having you on a panel is not enough. So thank you so much for just coming in and having a chat with me."
Happy to be here. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but a lot of times people talk to me and they're like, "God, I wish I was recording this conversation." I'm like, "Do I wish you were recording this conversation?"
I think a lot of people took a lot away from the TrailCon panel, and I think you've got so much to talk about, and the thing that the kind of thread that I wanted to follow in this conversation specifically is sort of that tension between being an athlete and playing the role of an influencer in certain things. Because I think right now, a lot of people see those two things as like one or the other. I see it as a little bit more of a spectrum because we have to kind of play in both fields. But, your background, right? You're a big mountain skier, you do all kinds of epic stuff in the backcountry, but then you got to bring it back to the people so that they can see all the crazy stuff that you did. I'd love just to get kind of a overarching, like, what is your experience like?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to social media, I think this is part of the topic that spurred the desire for this conversation is I I think a lot of athletes, and human beings in general have some tension with social media. And I think that tension's maybe even leveled up a little bit as like a female athlete because on one hand, social media is really frustrating. And in a lot of ways, it's destroying the parts of my ski career that I love and value, and a lot of the things that I started my ski career because I was passionate about, be them films, magazines, those kind of things is why I became a professional skier. And the change of media in general, kind of spurred by social media, has made it so those things in their form they existed in when I was getting into this don't really exist the same way anymore. And there's just this like frustration too of like when you are an athlete, I think an influencer is like the anti-athlete. Like I always say, like, sorry, influencers out there, but like the main talent you need as an influencer is just shamelessness to like talk at your phone all the time about yourself. And when you're an athlete, it's like, well, no, I've earned the credibility to influence your purchasing decision, especially in ski equipment in my sport. But like and it just gets so leveled up when you have brands cut their entire athlete team in exchange for influencers. And I think the natural frustration, and also like, am I part of the problem when I'm one of those people that's like making my life look so sick and epic all the time online? And am I contributing to the mental health crisis that social media is definitely responsible for? So there's all this negative, right, that we talked about with social media. But the flip side of it, and this is where the tension you're talking about really comes in, is this dichotomy that yes, social media is frustrating. And yes, it's hard. Brands forever have wanted ROI on athletes. That's the golden ticket. So
Mm.
now they see these follower numbers or these engagement numbers as ROI. Do I think that that's valid? No, I think that's flawed. We can get into that. But so I understand brands finally wanting to attach a number to like the value of an athlete. But the thing is with social media is it has opened up a lot of other revenue streams for me. I think it's enabled me to extend my career longer than I thought. And the thing that we talked about that I think is the thing that we don't talk about enough in social media is that as an athlete, for the first time in this era, I'm in control of my own story and I'm in control of what the world sees of me. Versus if I was an athlete kind of pre social media, it's up to a film editor, a writer, a brand. It's somebody else is always telling my story. And so I think that that's the gift that I have to like remind myself that I get with social and try to use it responsibly while also still playing the game. And it's like if someone's going to pay me to do this thing, in these niche sports like we don't make a lot of money. So we got to do what we got to do. And I think I ask my followers to shed me grace in that light sometimes. Like they know I'm just trying to there's parts of everybody's job that we don't like, and a lot of times I get to partner with, awesome brands and my full sponsors I really believe in. But sometimes you're like, does she really love those sheets or is she just trying to get paid? And I'm like, well, I do like the sheets and I do like bougie bedding and I'm just trying to get paid. I know this content has nothing to do with me at all. But I think like for me, I also would get so frustrated when I'd put out content about skiing, about me in the mountains, doing something I'm proud of. Nobody cares. Put out a selfie of my dog, or even like one of my biggest pieces of content, which actually wasn't sponsored by a sheet company, but it should have been, was I did a video on how to fold a fitted sheet,
Wow.
which by the way is super possible and attainable. Everybody can do it. Side note.
Goals. Goals right there.
But that's like one of my most viral pieces of content of my entire like existence online. Obviously has nothing to do with even athletics, right? But I think one thing I realized through a friend of mine kind of pointed it out to me is just that like social media is a gift for people to try to get to know athletes, like who they are as people. Like they are already following me because they respect my skiing. They know what I'm capable of skiing, but what excites them. And I think the way I relate to this is how I feel about musicians. Because I actually follow quite a few musicians on Instagram, and it's really fascinating to get a peek into who they are and what they do. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's a daily, honestly, battle. I have a social of like, okay, how do I do what I need to do? How do I like run this line where, I'm capitalizing on the opportunities I have, but I can still look myself in the mirror at the end of the day. I still have respect of my peers. I'm not crossing the line. Where is the line? Like, was that too much of a thirst trap? I don't know, but that's actually what I'm wearing. Like,
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think one of the things from I've got to imagine on the athlete side of things is this idea of, my work should speak for itself. Like I've put so much energy into getting to this level in the sport, and why is that not enough? Why do I have to do all this extra stuff? And this sort of concept that like being a pro isn't just about skiing at a high level, or in my case mountain biking at a high level, competing. It's about having to do all these other things to satisfy the deliverables, as they're called in the brand and social world, right? I have to do all this stuff. I have to be a professional filmmaker and a professional athlete at the same time, otherwise I can't be a professional athlete anymore. And you have to supplement your athletic performance with all this content creation to pay the bills, because there is a bit more of a level playing field, which is good and bad. I think you kind of alluded to that as well, where anybody can sort of do this now, but also anybody can do this now.
yeah. My fiance Todd Laguerre is also a professional skier, and we kind of like reminisce about this sometimes, like when we come back in from a big day in the field, like a big film sled day, and we reminisce about like the early parts of our career where we could just like eat and go to sleep. But now we need to edit like a mini movie to like put out before we go to bed after we've just been in the field for 12 hours, just kind of like bitching about like the actual workload, like that people are like, what do you like do all summer? I'm like, oh my God, like catch up on like you said, we're like I'm like a full production house for like myself as an athlete, like all the time. And then but I have to do it on my phone that's really glitchy and small, and everything just randomly disappears sometimes, and you're like, but yeah, I think that it's another conversation we have a lot of is like some of like my hero, I think a lot of people's hero athletes in the ski world, the question of like, would they be able to exist if they were an athlete right now? Like the perfect example is Seth Morrison, the Prince of Darkness, basically is his name. He's kind of like a totally under the radar only ski guy. And like he's one of the most prolific talents in ski history. But I don't think he would work in this era. And that's wild that like if his gift there's out there somewhere, there's today's Seth Morrison for sure, who's we're never going to see their athletic ability because they're not willing to play this game. And I'm really lucky. Like I came to this career. I have a degree in media management. I got a degree in broadcast producing and directing. So like had I not been an athlete, like I would have been a producer, of some sort. And so I feel like I've been able to bring that producer mindset to my career and everything I do. And we also had this conversation of like kind of running myself as an athlete as like my own personal brand, basically, and having the ability to like separate my like self from my brand that's the athlete of Amy Ingebrigtsen that I'm running, which is hard because as an athlete, it's really hard not to take these things, all these things that we go through personally. But yeah, I think that it's just it's weird because it's in some ways I don't think my career would have been as successful had I been in a different era where this ability to do all these things helps me stand out. Especially because I had some accidents early in my career that kind of affected my performance, I think. I
Mm.
was fully buried in an avalanche quite early in my career. Just faced some really traumatic situations that did hands down affect the trajectory of my like performance side of my career. But it also made me kind of another thing we talked about, like go back to the drawing board and say, like, okay, the goal was to be the best professional big mountain skier of all time. I've injured my brain very like not actual brain injury, but like mental trauma to where like that's really hard for me. I wonder, I'm going to still try to see if I can get there, but in the meantime, what are these other ways I can like add value and still make this dream work, right? Like the dream of professional skiing for me was to be able to ski all over the world and have these ski experiences that I wouldn't have been able to have as a non-professional skier, you know?
That's the best part about this era. I mean, I'm 45 years old and actually having the most success I've ever had on two wheels. My entire youth, I was trying so hard to be one of the best mountain bikers and, doing demos and traveling and competing and so committed to it and just could not get, you know, because in that era, it was exactly that. Who is the magazine editor? Who's the filmer? Who's the editor? And early on, I started learning video production. And now I decided, no, I'm going to double down on this and actually start producing content that I think is, and I think the word that you said that really stood out to me is value. I'm going to create value. And I think I'm in this very interesting place. And, I'd be curious how you sort of identify with this, but I don't see myself as an influencer by any means. I'm also not like a pro competitive athlete, but I'm in the middle kind of coaching and sharing tips and helping guide people along through my content, helping inspire them, helping them pick up tips and tricks along the way. And there are a lot of brands that really value that. And that's where I'm finding success. So it's never going to be that I'm number one on the podium, but actually, like, I'm finding more success because more people resonate with, like, hey, this guy's helping people out and we want to be part of that. We identify with that. He's speaking to the same people that we speak to. But I also find myself in these situations where I feel like I'm playing Go Fish with a sponsor because I'm sort of laying out, like, here are all the things that I do. Oh, I have an Instagram following over 100,000. Is that no? Okay. I have a YouTube following over 100,000. No. Okay. I have a newsletter. I have a business to business podcast. And so you're laying all these out, waiting for like one to hit. And how many of these verticals can you basically develop while keeping your head in check, while also being able to actually deliver those things and then finding those perfect brand fits along the way. It's such an interesting time right now. And when you find those people that value whatever, Go Fish card you
Whatever card
played,
you've given out.
that's like the magic moment, right? Because then you know how to continue on that conversation and build and do a real partnership. But finding that fit, I feel like, has been the most challenging part of this phase, because I think that a lot of brands are still kind of stuck in the snakes and sparklers moment of like, well, we just use like either influencers who have nothing to do with the sport but have big audiences, or we use competitive athletes, and you're not really either one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard. I also think that no matter what level or kind of athlete you are, I think that the demands of the social requirements, the influencer side of the job, is taxes and takes away from your ability to perform as an athlete, especially mentally, just because it's like so much focus. I think that for me, it's slightly different because in my world of big mountain skiing, yes, there is the Freeride World Tour and NST. There are ways to compete in that space, and maybe the Olympics are coming down the pipeline at some point. I've never been a competitive skier. I competed at a handful of times when I was young, trying to get my foot in the door, but that was never the skiing I was interested in or wanted to do. So like that's basically been like a through line of imposter syndrome for my entire career. Because I'm like, oh, I'm a professional athlete, who never is going to win anything. I mean, especially not now that we don't have our film awards. Like there used to be Powder Magazine awards, like Best Female and Best Segments and stuff like that used to be massive goals for me, but that went away. So we don't have that anymore. So it's interesting to be an athlete that can't win anything. And I'm also not like an expedition mountaineer where I can say, oh, I'm the first person or woman or whatever to do something. I'm like here to like experience and share the best skiing. And so sometimes I relate myself when I think of myself as like a professional athlete, it's like I have more in common with like an artist than like an NFL player. So it's kind of like already a baseline kind of imposter syndrome place to start, right? And then you add in this layer of like, well, no, now actually she's just an influencer. And again, that again, like I think men get folded into that, but women get placed and pegged as like an influencer way quicker, way easier. And then also it's easier for me to kind of like pander into some of the influencery stuff. Like this year, everybody wants me to make these videos where I just put my ski clothes on, slightly sped up to some random Selena Gomez song. And I'm like, sorry, what? And then it's like literally my most viral content of the whole year. And I'm like, okay, well, now I do feel like a ridiculous influencer, but it's working and it wildly shows, well, my outerwear sponsor Nerona, like it's a great thing for them and people love it and they comment and I try to make it funny. Like I tried to do this funny one. I was skiing on like a -5 day in Vermont. And so I wore like literally 3 puffy jackets and I did one of like putting on what ended up probably being like $5,000 worth of like layers and jackets to be clear. But yeah, it went like crazy viral. And I think those kind of things are frustrating because then it does actually kind of affect my mentality as an athlete where I'm like, am I just an influencer? But at the same time, I've been in all these Warren Miller movies. I've skied everywhere. I've skied for lots of brands. I am a very high level skier. I think very deeply about skiing, conditions, snow, equipment. So like I have earned the right to influence, maybe like the privilege to influence. Like and I am influenceable too, right? Like I go on Instagram and people that are skincare experts or whatever, like I, fawn all over this stuff of like, what am I supposed to do with my face? How do I like, gracefully age, like those kind of things. And so I think I despise being called an influencer. And it reminds me a lot of early in my career. I used to get called a ski model a lot, which used to really piss me off. And it really pissed me off more because men wouldn't be called ski models at that time. They would be like, you'd be on a shoot, you're all skiing the same stuff, you're all trying to get pictures of the same silly jacket or whatever. And the men would be referred to as athletes and the women would be referred to as ski models. And like, we're all still jumping off the same cornices and doing this. It's not like I'm standing there modeling a jacket on the ridge and the men are skiing. Like it's, so I think that was something that struck a chord really early. And I know like to a lot of people being called a model would be a compliment. I just think when you come from like the athlete world, it's not. And so I think that like influencer in my mind has kind of been replaced. It's like a trigger word that's replacing ski model. And the reality is to ski model, to ski for camera, you have to be a wildly talented skier actually. But it just, for some reason, I do think it kind of spurs this imposter syndrome that I know most athletes and human beings deal with, where it's like, what am I doing? Like when I look back at myself, I'm like, what did I do? Like I'm not in TGR or Warren Miller this year. Do I count? Do I matter? Like, what am I like doing, And I do take effort and I put together my own pieces. One thing I really have enjoyed in my career is shifting to self-producing and self-directing a lot of projects. And I love that. And I find a lot of joy in that. But then I get like pretty devastated when they don't even maybe work. And like, what is the benchmark for success of working to? Like, I don't know. I think, yeah, it's one of those kind of fraught topics that I think is a roller coaster of emotions kind of literally daily for me. And again, mentally it's a lot. It's taxing. Like in the summer, I have all the time in the world to obsess about this stuff. But like in the winter, when you're tired and you're on trips and like you've been like, I'm still doing crazy physical things all day, every day, especially if it's a storm cycle or a film cycle or whatever. And it's like, I'm spread so thin because I'm trying to produce, I'm trying to find the money, I'm trying to run everything, I'm trying to actually be an athlete, do something impressive. And then I'm also trying to make sure I'm hitting all my deliverables and making sure that like I have spreadsheets that run what I have to make sure I'm posting every month because it's so complicated between all of my contracts. Because I would say of my main full sponsorship contracts, only half of them are actually endemic, like ski brands, where it's quite organic to get the product on my social because it's ski equipment and I'm skiing all the time. The other half are non-endemic, so it's like a stretch. Like I have to create those situations.
Yeah. Oh, that leads me into a question that I've been dying to ask, actually. And this is a question I have for almost every athlete I meet, because I think, you could reach out to so many different brands and so many, you know, how do you balance out specifically? You talk about the spreadsheet. How do you balance out sponsorship? Because if you went crazy and you just blew up everybody and you had like 100 sponsors, obviously the deliverables would be so heavy and so crazy and just overwhelming. But I also wonder, like, how do you balance out who you work with and the volume of all that stuff as you go from season to season? Now you have projects and stuff like that, but I want to pull that aside for just a second. When you think about like your own personal sponsors as an athlete, how do you decide like is there like a number that you're trying to hit? Is there an amount of deliverables you're trying to hit? Like what is the limiting factor for you to how many partners? Because now it's you can go non-endemic, right? You can reach out beyond the ski industry. Previously it was like outerwear, skis, maybe helmet, nutrition, but then now it's like, oh, now I can, have this. What is that limiting factor for you?
I think it's a weird balance of resources because I think what's kind of frustrating in the ski space, and I think a lot of space right now, is like there's a lot of brands that have kind of small dollar amounts, but still want kind of a lot of deliverables. And so then you have to like stack a bunch to be able to make enough money to like live. I mean, like there's the ski side where it's like, well, I need my like equipment I need covered. And there's been two schools of thought. I don't know if this happens in cycling, but in skiing, there's a lot of brands out there that kind of go head to toe. There's been this head to toe pressure for quite a few years now. I'd say like for the meat of my career, the last 10, 15 years, there's been quite a few brands that like push you to be sort of head to toe. Solomon's biggest example of that. And for me, for my ski equipment, I have never really wanted, I've really tried to stay as far away from head to toe as possible because I personally want the protection of diversification of like, I don't want all my eggs in one basket. So then I get dropped by one brand and I have nothing. That is something that's always been really important to me. I have over the years consolidated. I wear Atomic helmet and goggles and skis, boots, bindings, poles. That's like a lot in one brand. That's basically two categories. Um, that was a big consolidation factor that like I resisted for a long time. They offered me a pro model goggle, so then I said yes. They knew exactly how to get me right where they wanted. But so I think that like the diversification is something that I have in the past been willing to sacrifice a certain dollar amount in order to maintain because it feels more secure to me to not be totally owned by one brand. The other side of it is like I have like kind of a bizarre mental equation of at a certain dollar amount, it needs to be a brand that I like, a product I actually want to use, and a product that's going to be easy for me to generate content of, like in my daily life. Because there's products that are easy and there's products that are hard. And then, of course, though, there's a number that you can get above where maybe that product's going to be kind of hard for me to integrate into my daily life, but that number is going to be high enough that I'm going to make it work. There's been a couple, I haven't had one of these partnerships in a while, but for a while, when the CBD brands were like hitting athletes super hard, they would come in with like way bigger numbers than like any of my other kind of non-endemic sponsors. And I'd be like, I have no idea how I'm going to get this like authentic CBD content integrated here, but that's so much money I have to say yes to it, you know?
Mm.
And so I think that the threshold for me that's been frustrating is like those brands that come in at that like kind of bottom quarter tier of like my kind of rate breakdown that I've invented, just based on what I've been able to get people to pay me, not really based on, because the other thing here that's weird is I don't have an athlete. We kind of like as athletes talk to each other, but then everybody keeps their cards really close to their chest. And like theoretically, some of our contracts say we're like not supposed to talk about what we're making with other athletes, which is maybe also kind of illegal. So it's kind of a weird thing when we try to figure out what to get paid, because there's not a lot of guidance for an athlete like me in an income bracket that I'm in, because I've got toyed over the years with getting an agent. And I know you were part of a podcast or a panel at TrailCon right before our panel talking about this. And there's been times where I've died for an agent. And then there's times where I'm like, well, I don't really make enough that I want to sacrifice 20% of it. And I'm not convinced that an agent's going to bring 20% or 40%, probably more, in to like validate their existence. But I think I want to say that like, oh, I only work with brands I totally believe in, but there's a number where if you come to me with those numbers, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to figure out how to smash this random product into my content. And I think my followers can tell.
I think
do.
there's
I think they
nuance
can
to that.
tell. And
There's gotta be.
I think on some level, I think some people are like, wow, what a sellout. And I think most people are like, there's parts of my job I don't like either. But, and then I think maybe sometimes I'm better at my job than you think. And people don't know, thankfully all of the brands I work with right now, I feel really lucky that I think, earlier in the whole social media thing, I was more like, I'll take it. I need the money. I need it, and now I can be like, I also have like a minimum number you have to hit. Like anything less than this number, I can't do this, just because I don't have the bandwidth. I definitely don't do like affiliate programs at all anymore. Every once in a blue moon, if there's some crazy product that I really want and is way too expensive, I can do like a one-off, but I'm not doing product exchange. You just have to draw the line. And also like there's the balance of making sure I'm not devaluing the other brands that I work with. And like trying to, one of the balances I try to keep is like a really clear hierarchy of like the investment a brand is making in me, making sure that they're getting proportionally, like, so I have the amount of money that I get paid by all the brands I work with. And if you're at the top of that level, you need to be top represented. And then it goes down the line. And so just trying to, I don't know, keep it pretty fair that way. It's a pay to play world out there, and my career is no different, unfortunately. That's maybe a shallow thing to say, but.
Do you feel like the conversation about branding has sort of fallen off in this new world of deliverables? I mean, it used to be all about like sticker placement and stuff like that, right? I feel like that's sort of not even part of any of these conversations anymore, because the visibility on our Instagram accounts or anywhere else is sort of reaching way farther than where that sticker could have been.
Yeah, I think that I actually hate the sticker war. I've kind of throughout my whole career, like very early on, I kind of like imposed a no sticker policy, because your ski sponsor wants no stickers on your skis, but they want all these stickers on your helmet. Your helmet sponsor wants no stickers on your helmet, but they want all these. And it's like everybody's battling what they want with their stickers. And I'm like, look, if we can't play nice with the stickers, nobody gets stickers. So we're done with the sticker itch, okay? So I actually just run a no sticker program, and I'm glad that like social has made that reasonable, just because I basically just the constant battle of like whose stickers bigger. It was ridiculous. And I think letting the product shine is most important, and I think stickers in ski equipment can kind of, I don't know. There was an era where like the more stickers you had on your skis, the more sponsors you had, and like that made you look cooler. Or like I definitely had one of my Subarus that had like all my sponsors. Remember when that was a thing where we like, no, I'm a no sticker person now. But yeah, no, I think that has changed a bit for sure, because to me I basically make sure I'm running through a balance of dedicated posts for my partners, and how many dedicated posts each partner gets based on their level of sponsorship of me, like basically how, my hierarchy of sponsors. And then my kind of mixed post where I, include everybody, or the organic exposure, or all of that stuff. And it does depend, because my ski My contracts still very much work like a real sponsorship where, yes, there's social media deliverables in there, but there's all these other things versus then I have other contracts that are like very social media heavy. Like I've been sponsored by Sierra Nevada Brewing for, God, I think it's going on like 7 years now. One of my most amazing partners. They've stood by me for so long. They've supported my projects in an amazing way. But it's a social media contract, especially with the sticker thing. Like in a different era, I would have had like a big Sierra Nevada sticker as like my head sponsor. I wear Sierra Nevada merch a lot, and that helps. But like it's just mostly just making sure I get posts with beer in there a lot. And I do events for them. I do projects for them. There's all kinds of other stuff. But like that's an example of like one of my title sponsors being basically a social media contract.
Interesting. I'd be curious to know when it comes to the deliverables themselves. Obviously we can film a lot of the stuff that we, put on our channels through, camera, GoPro, whatever. But interestingly, like one of the people or one of the roles has been, I think, impacted the heaviest with social media is the photographers. And getting a sick ski photo is like the top thing, I think. And same thing in mountain biking. Like you want to have sick photos that you can share with your partners and stuff like that. But previously, it used to be the brands that would just pay the photographers for each photo, to license the photo and stuff like that. In this era of social media specifically, how is that working for you? And how do you kind of balance or rebalance that out?
Yeah, it's that's the question I have a lot in these, maybe not like my sponsorships. Like, so there's my sponsor partners, and then there's people that come to me for like social campaigns where it's like, hey, we're going to partner with you to do 5 posts or 3 posts, or it's going to be a 3 month campaign, and needing to build in like content creation budget out of that. Cause it's like, if you are paying me as an athlete influencer to like be in the product, like I can't also shoot all the product. So I need to pay the photographers that I'm going to pull their images, or like this was on my close stories last week, but like my partner Todd gripes all the time about like I should be getting a cut cuz like I film all of your dumb Instagram stuff. Like it was just so yeah, and with the photography thing specifically, I think it's really hard, especially in snow sports. Like getting good imagery of skiing and snowboarding is so tough because you can only do it once there's a track, it's over and you can't do it again. And it just used to be so rewarding. You work so hard to get these images, and then yeah, the magazine comes in the mail and you're on the cover and it's amazing. And now it's like, okay, we worked so hard to get these images, and somebody looks at it for 2.5 seconds max on a screen this big, and you're like, god damn. So you have to shoot it differently. But there was, I think it's not a thing anymore, but there was an era where magazines were still really happening. And I bet it was like this in biking too. And social media was happening. And there was a big kerfuffle of like, do you post your bangers? Do you wait? Will a magazine editor still take the photo if it's been on Instagram? Maybe no, maybe yes. And there was this, and it's the same in the films. Like to me, I still kind of think it's weird that a lot of athletes put their like A plus plus bangers on social media mid-season, and then you go watch the film in the fall and you're like, well, I've seen all these shots on this athlete's social, so like the film's not as cool. But at the same time, you're putting these shots up in real time in season when they're most relevant to the followers, and some of those clips maybe are garnering, racking up massive views. So like, is that more beneficial to the partners than somebody being really hyped on the film or really hyped on the shot in the magazine? Like, so now we're in an era where it seems like just put it, if it's cool, put it on the internet, put it on the internet immediately. I think that's affecting the quality of these kind of heritage media experiences that I still really love, right? But you're talking to someone in their mid 30s, like I don't know what a 22-year-old thinks about ski movie these days. I know what other people, other adults in kind of the like 30 to 60 range think, which is still where the majority of the purchasing power lies, which I think is like an interesting kind of thing for brands to fight with. Brands want to stay young, capture youth, but then also we need to look at where the purchasing power is in all of our industries as well, especially as both our sports kind of become more elitist, I think, in ways, just as the equipment gets so expensive and whatnot. But yeah, I think, and then like photographers, like, I think being a sports photographer has always been really tough. And I think it's still the way you actually make money as a photographer. My dad's a professional photographer
Mm.
and filmmaker, and I actually run all of his photo submissions. I do all his processing, his invoicing, submitting, and all that stuff, just mostly because he sucks at emailing. I want to make sure people buy pictures he has of me. Full disclosure. But I run into this all the time where it's just still about you build in those social media packages to your buys. So once in a while, a brand still wants to buy an ad image, and you pack in that value by saying, okay, you buy this image, full non-exclusive rights, 5 years, blah blah blah. You can put this on the side of the billboard. You can do whatever you want with this image for this amount. And to sweeten that deal, I'll give you a 10-20 image social media image gallery that you can use on social media at leisure. I think a lot of photographers are getting pinned into going back to like gear trade for social media photos, which I think sucks for photographers trying to make it. But then like the real golden ticket, the only way, because you never made money selling photos to magazines anyway,
Mhm.
but you build those relationships with the brands to then shoot. Like you're seeing a lot of brands now either have like kind of photographers they work with exclusively to do like their annual content, or a lot of brands now have internal photographers and they basically are only using photography. But it does become like a gray area and I try to really voice the rights of the photographers I work with. Like when a brand's like, hey, we want you to do this big paid post where we're going to put this big spend behind this and we want to use these photos. I'm like, cool, you have to pay for those photos. And I know you're not going to pay much for them, a few $100, whatever, but like you have to pay for those photos. It's just hard figuring out how much do you pay a photographer for a photo that's going to be seen. Like a lot of times now I'm running into like when they want to use photos in reels, so it's not even like a native feed post. Like, how do we figure out what that's worth? I don't know. But these people, like, I can't take epic ski photos of myself. I can, because like a brand like Neurona will be like, hey, we want like all your GoPro footage, but we want to like be able to see your clothes because that's like what we sponsor you for. And I'm like, well, you can't see my body. Sometimes you can like see my shins or like my wrists in my POV footage. But like, if you want footage of me skiing where you can see my jacket, we got to get someone else involved, and
Yeah.
that person has to be compensated.
I'd love to talk about the crew that you work with through the lens of the projects that you've been putting together. And I think this is a really interesting way that you've sort of grown well beyond the social media stuff into like content creation for actual projects. And that seems to be a big chunk of also what you're doing. So you've kind of taken this idea of like anybody can be a content creator into like I'm going to put together my own projects. It's great to be in a Warren Miller or a TGR film, but like I can also do a lot of this myself. And it sounds like you have some, you went to school for some of that stuff, but can you talk about what it takes to put one of these projects together? And feel free if there's a specific project that you want to shout out for it and use
Yeah.
that as the kind of guide for it. But I'm really interested in this idea because at Red Bull, the athlete project was currency in a
Right.
major way. And if you think about any Red Bull athlete, chances are you're not thinking about a podium that they stood on. You're probably thinking about a project they did.
Mhm.
And so I think you've really hit on something that's like, oh, this is super valuable to my career and to the brands that support me. And I'm asking for a lot to be able to create it. But I also know that this is probably way more valuable than a, handful of deliverables for social media or whatever. I'd love to hear you just talk about the idea of a project and how it all comes together.
Yeah, totally. I think we'll maybe circle back to that last point you made because I'm not sure if brands see that as true right now. That
Mm.
these films are more valuable than a handful of social clips,
They'll
which
figure it
is
out.
which is sad. But yeah, I think we talked about this on our panel of just ways to add value as an athlete. And we were talking to a bunch of runners who want to run a race and be on a podium. But I was coming at it again from like we talked about, like I don't win anything. So how do I show my value? And a lot of my career at the early stages, you're kind of like waiting for the call. You're waiting for someone to invite you. You're waiting for like the way the ski films work is like a brand you're sponsored by makes a financial arrangement with one of the film companies, and then somehow they decide which of their athletes like goes in the film, and it's like kind of this whole like basically like money conversation. It's not as much a conversation about like, hey, who's the sickest skier that we should feature, unfortunately. And I think early in my career, I just realized that, well, my whole life I've known I'm a control freak, better and worse sometimes. And like that is giving way too much control away from me. And especially some of these brands where the buy into these movies is really high, but then you have no control. Even if you put together, you have a 6 season and you put a bunch of great footage down on hard drives, you have no control how much of that's getting used, how it's, working out. I mean, Warren Miller kind of ran a more uh, predictable pattern in that way, but like TGR didn't, and so you didn't know, like, oh, I have all these 6 shots. Oh, they used 2 of them. Like, and not only did I go through that a little bit myself, but I really watched like other peers go through that. And so to me, it was like, well, I need to take matters into my own hands. And I do think that like I was at the early stages of like starting. We have all athletes making their own projects now. Like that's just kind of required that everybody's going to make personal film. On some level, I think that's really cool because you have these athletes taking charge of like their own stuff. But I also think that the magic of ski media specifically is all these talented athletes together, and it's very rare to have a talent that is fundamentally talented enough, has enough personality, and has a cool enough story to actually like carry something just themselves. And so we have these like small little bite-sized projects that are kind of leaving you wanting more, but then our big projects are stripped of funding and not doing what they used to be. So like part of it's like, do I like what I'm doing? But like to me it was just I'm not the person who can sit around and wait for the phone to ring. And we talked about that of like, rather than waiting for the opportunities to come to me, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to create them. And that's been through a lot of different things, sometimes creating my own kind of individual projects, which I most of the time try to feature other people in. But also bringing ideas and doing projects like for like branded content. Like I skied for Spider for years and I did this really cool branded content piece for them called The Art of Confidence, which we ended up getting all the females on the team to work on. And I directed that, but like for them, But the process is difficult. And I think a lot of athletes that don't have a background in producing get like a really rude way. I'm sure Michelle Parker's Originate series.
Mhm.
That was her first kind of foray in like self-producing a self-project. And I remember her saying like, oh, I am just getting spanked by like the amount of work this is. And that's true. Like people right now are in summer and people are like, what do you do all summer as a skier? Do you just like lounge and do squats? And I'm like, no, this is my pitching season. This is my email season. I'm making decks. I'm making budgets. I'm trying to figure this stuff out. And so, I mean, I think, yeah, I've done a handful of personal projects, but I think the biggest project I've done to date was a film I did in association with Protect Our Winters called The Hypocrite. And this was I'd done like different levels of like just season edits that I make snazzy to like weird art films. I did this film with Sweetgrass called Boots Over Brim where I blended skiing and Western dance. Random, loved it. Probably the project I'm going to love the most for my entire life. But with The Hypocrite, I ended up directing a climate documentary as a skier, which is crazy. By far the hardest thing I've ever done, like, period. But that process was really crazy because the hardest part of making these projects is the funding. And to get the funding, you have to like you have to be organized. And you have to prove that it's going to work, and you have to figure out a way to prove that perceived value. And so with Hypocrite, I started the funding by applying for a grant from Protect Our Winters. That got my funding started, but then I had to go and pitch a bunch of other brands for additional funding. And that project was a 26-minute documentary with 13 different characters. And so I was looking for a big budget. We ended up making it on, I think I was able to scrape together like 70% of what I was hoping to make. But that process started like with a massive 9-page single-spaced grant application, then multiple iterations of a deck, many different, versions of budgets and all of these things. And I think with like all of the projects I've made, like I said this about Boots Over Brim, I've said this about every project I've ever made, is like I literally had to like go into the hills and like mine for gold to make it happen. Like that, the funding is the hardest part. The second hardest part is the distribution. Trying to figure out the way to make these brands see value in these projects is promising them that people are going to see it. And in today's world where things don't go very organically viral on YouTube anymore. Like I used to put up like just a season edit and it would get like 150,000 views for just some stupid thing to some song I don't even have rights to, like whatever. That's not happening anymore, you know? It can sometimes, but it really matters like whose channel you're going on, what's your distribution plan, like trying to figure out how to get people to actually see these projects to me is actually the hardest part right now that I don't have a good answer for. So then when I'm going to brands to try to figure out how to get them to say yes to giving me the money I need to make these projects, because again, it's not really just like a GoPro edit anymore. It's like I need to pay filmers. Filmers want $1,500 a day. I need to buy rights for music. You can't really get a song that's worth anything for less than $3,000. Like all of a sudden, we're talking about if you can scrape together 50 grand, which is a lot of money, you can barely make a 3-minute piece, you know,
Yeah.
which is wild.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, we were talking about this before we started recording. That's not paying me either as a director, producer, executive producer, or athlete, right? Like if we're in Hollywood and the executive producer is the person that's getting the project funded and figuring out how it's going to be seen, you take 20% of the total budget. I'm not taking anything out of my budgets for these projects I'm making. And this is like the flaw, right? Like I'm not paying myself for my work. I get paid by my brands to exist as an athlete, and being in these projects is an avenue of exposure for me. So that's like me continuing to do my job there, which is how I justify in my brain not paying myself for doing these projects, even though like again on the hypocrite, the amount of work I put into that was like
Astronomical.
crazy. Yeah, crazy. It's not even comparable. And in that film, I was executive producer and the director. And at a point in time, we had a director on the project that was going to be paid nearly $20,000. That ended up not working out. When the director became me, there was no, I didn't get, I didn't make a cent.
Yeah.
Did it further my career and open up a lot of opportunities for public speaking where I did get paid some and big exposure? Yes, that film's a little different because it had this kind of altruistic motive of really wanting to share this message, and having that be like the most important thing versus like a hey check me out ski video. Little hard. I can tell you that there's like, oh, I'm trying to like uplift. So no, I just want you to check me out skiing and think I'm rad. um let's be honest.
I'd love to know a little bit about the actual like tactical process of putting that okay, the grant process is maybe slightly
Separate and
different.
not really applicable to sports.
But let's just say for any athlete that's out there that is listening to this, it's like, oh, I need to start thinking in a project mindset. What are those steps that you take? How did you figure out, okay, say you have the idea of like, I'm gonna go do this thing in 24 hours and it's gonna be an amazing project, blah blah blah. How do you figure out the the things that you need in terms of like, oh, I need two cameras, I need an editor, I need a drone pilot, I need music, I need whatever. How do you like even know where to start with that? And then how do you build out the rest? What are the key elements to that pitch as you're talking to the brands? Reaching out to brands, let's maybe set that aside, but like when you're really trying to package together what you need from start to finish on that pitch, what are you thinking about?
My biggest piece of advice and like my biggest kind of strategy or mantra in this kind of thing in my life, but like especially in my career and especially in producing projects, is make it as easy as possible for people to say yes. So if you're just some bro and you write your team manager an email and you say, yo, bro, I've got this like sick idea. I'm going to do this ski thing and I'm going to film it. It's going to be sick and everybody's going to love it. Even if your team manager is like, oh, actually, that is a sick idea, then your team manager, or whoever your conduit to the brand is, needs to then like go make an Excel sheet. Da, da, da. And you have to understand that like the person I'm usually working with at brands usually has to go above me somewhere to get it approved. And they have to go to these channels. I call them the bean counters. There's people in all these brands, no matter how sick and outdoorsy this brand is, there's somebody up there that's like a spreadsheet guy. So for me, like I give the people that need to say yes, like the people that need to go get it greenlit, I give them all the tools possible to be able to do that. So this day and age, that does include some sort of a visual deck. I actually try to like pull back on the deckness because like People are getting flooded with decks now. They have way too many words. I'm on the committee for POW trying to figure out who gets the next Protect Our Winners grant. And so I just looked at 30 different film decks. And like now I'm in the position of trying to decide how do we greenlit like this, which was a good process for me because I'm also in the season where I'm putting together a bunch of projects to pitch to my brands. So yeah, you need a deck. You need to be as resourceful as possible and like respectful of people's time and energy. So, like, give them what they need to know to say yes, not too much, not too little. When you put together a budget, format it in the language like if you want someone to understand you need to put it in the language they understand. So if you need the bean counters to say yes to something, send them a fully baked out budget in Excel where they can see everything, like just format it professionally. Don't just write it in an email, and then give them a one sheet as well where you distill it down. Like, are you a visual person? Are you a words person? Are you a numbers person? Basically, anybody you're going to talk to is going to fit into one of those three categories. So do all those things. As far as like learning how to know what you need to plan for, like that is, I think, the learning curve a lot of athletes are going through. I'm lucky because I came at this again with like, I should have probably not been a professional skier and just gone and been a producer. Like that would have ultimately probably been a better life plan, but way less fun probably. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But that's experience and being willing to ask questions and being willing to do the legwork in advance. So if I am pitching projects right now, I am thinking about who I want to work with. Then I'm calling them. Hey, this is a loose idea. This is the time commitment I'm thinking. What are your rates? What do you think this would cost? Hey, I know this other athlete who did this film I really admire. I'm going to reach out to them. How much did they spend on music? How did they even get that song? Like, I don't even know that process. So for my career, like I've tapped like one of my early self projects I did. I had a producer friend that I hired her to be my music producer to help teach me how to do the music rights. Then for my project I did last year for Blue Hour, I did all the negotiation with Sony myself. And people are like, "Oh, it's Sony. You're never going to get the song." Da 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 da. And I was like, "Watch me," you
Yeah.
know. And so I think that like, it's kind of back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, just you can't just be good at skiing. And it takes work. It takes tons of emails, planning. The more organized and dialed you can be, the easier it's going to be for these brands to say yes. I think that that's what it comes down to. And if you as an athlete aren't that person, work with someone who is. Bring on a director who can also produce. Bring on a producer. Like find those resources, especially if it's like your first project, to learn. And I think a lot of people are trial by fire, doing the best they can. Like I know Molly Armanino is a fellow skier who just produced her first film this last year, and she was calling me all the time and she wanted to see examples of my budgets and my decks and all that stuff, and that's great, and I'm happy to help her. And I think she was like, that was a really intense experience, and that she's going to learn from for the next one. But yeah, I think the main thing is just make it as easy as possible. Like think about your audience and who's going to be the person, and like also think of reasons they might say no and try to like deal with those in advance.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, stack the deck in your favor as much as possible. I think that's a really key thing that you called out is this game of telephone within the brands where it's never just the person you're dealing with given the green light. It's always, a layer or two above. And if you develop the tools for that person to have that conversation in a more effective way. We had a way at Red Bull where it started with the idea in a sentence, and that through the game of telephone, the stronger that sentence was, the better chance it was to actually get approved. We're going to jump out of space and break the speed of sound in free fall. Like that, you can repeat that
that's
multiple times
catchy.
over. Um, and so having that idea in a sentence, it really clicks. If you can't spit it out in one sentence, automatically the next person and the next person up, they're not going to do it any better than you are. And so stuff that travels, the idea in a sentence, the one pager that simplifies it all, the Excel document that fully lays out exactly what is going into it and where their money is
Well,
going. And
where every dollar is
yeah,
going.
yeah,
Yeah. Not
exactly.
just this for production, this for post production. Like, no, I'm slotting 20 filmer days at this rate, da da da. Like, and budgets, when you're pitching, a budget is proposed. So those things might ebb and flow and change. And like that's a strategy thing when you're making these projects. But you got to just, I don't know. I feel like the organization is massive. And again, you can probably attest to this as somebody who's had these pitches come across your deck where, it's hard because I think a lot of athletes don't have the mindset where they love working in Excel, know how to use Excel, Google Sheets, whatever. Um, I think that's a challenge like that a lot of athletes face.
Yeah. I think a lot of athletes are still hung up on this idea of like, why can't I just be good? Why do I have to do all this stuff? And the athletes who figure it out, like you and I have, are going to be able to be successful. And I think also be successful long term. The ability to lengthen our careers, the fact that I'm, 45 years old and still doing it, it's because I've figured out how to do this and I'm applying it and still bringing value to a large audience. And I think, that's another thing is that, yet your career doesn't end at a certain point. It could effectively just go on as long as you want it to, as long as you're able to, translate this into the brands and translate value back out of it. I'd love to hear you talk about that element of it is like, your future as you continue to, grow within the sport. You've got all these, abilities to not have to rely on just sponsors from the endemic industry to survive, but you've also built an audience of people who care about your opinion on stuff, who are paying attention to, the things that you're talking about. How do you feel about, looking into the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great thing to bring up because I think it's very like front of mind for me in my career right now. You just spurred something in my mind though of saying like the why athletes think just being good isn't enough. And I think it's important to point out that like that's not a new issue. And I think one other advantage I had coming into my ski career is that my dad was a professional skier much of my youth. And my dad, as we've discussed, not crazy organized and not great at self promotion. And he was a great, great skier. And he wanted that to be enough. And I had this view of his ski career where he was better than a lot of these people whose careers were working better, but he just wasn't willing to do the work of being a professional athlete. He just wanted to be good at skiing. And I think that that's where a lot of athletes can draw some help from is like, I think a lot of people, again, I'm speaking more about skiing because I think it's quite maybe different, again, in this kind of free skiing style that I do. People are like, well, I just really love skiing. I'm really good at it and I want to ski a lot. But you have to love the work of skiing, which is the photo shoot days, the film days, the waiting around, the hiking, the group dynamics and creativity it takes to like actually create something and tell these stories and share these experiences and the work ultimately of like being a valuable tool to these brands that you work with. And like having we kind of had this conversation where like I love to ski and I'm a good skier, but I also am very clear that I am in a sense like a chess piece on a big board that all of these brands are moving around with like value and I don't want to like dehumanize it too much, but for me it's actually kind of helpful to dehumanize it a little bit so that when you get cut, which you will get cut, it doesn't matter what the brand thinks of you and how much family you are and how much you've done, like that's at the end of the day it's a business. And like it's devastating, it is when it happens. It's especially when you're blindsided, especially when brands do it in a way that's could be handled better. It's going to happen. And so like just thinking about, we talked about this of like, how do you add value? Like, what is my role with a brand? And I had this kind of quippy thing I said, right, about like not being able to have a relationship with a jacket. And
Mhm.
so like, I see myself as an athlete. I think that brands put athletes in the marketing category and marketing budgets. And I think some brands, you see brands that understand the difference between branding and marketing, and you see brands that don't. And athletes to me fall in the branding category more than like the POS marketing category. Like even when we're talking about like affiliate links and stuff, like even the way I operate on social media with products I buy, I might get introduced to something from like a link in like an influencer's profile, but then I like open it up in my external browser and I think about it and like those people are the introduction to a brand to me. Like they're not like my point of sale. Like, am I, and so I see my role as the relationship builder, the conduit between a brand and a consumer, wherein I have these brands where it's like, yeah, how much of a real relationship can you have with a jacket? A little bit, maybe there's like blood on it or some tears, whatever, but like it's still at the end of the day, it's a jacket. But you can have, and again, this is where the social media thing and all this stuff comes together, is like, you can have a perception of a relationship with an athlete. Sometimes, in the case of me, like I will DM you back. It's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, but like, are we best friends? No, but I will. Like, if you ask me where to go skiing, where to mount your skis, what to do about your liners, I will message you back. Like, that is a relationship. Like, the jacket can't talk to you. And so I think it's like this ethos I've had in my career of understanding my role. And this goes back to the projects and everything too, understanding what I am. My job is to be very good at skiing, but the way I make money is by being valuable to brands. That money enables me to do the part of the skiing I love. That enables me to go ski lines in Alaska that I maybe wouldn't have access to otherwise, go ski around the world in places I wouldn't be able to get to, work with different athletes and production companies that, like, for me, I love actually the job of being an athlete. And it's a little different because, again, in the case of someone who can win something, sometimes you just are like a really good competitive athlete. But I think for you to have a longevity career, even if you're in a sport that has podiums that you can stand on, is learning how to add this other layer of being a real person. That is something that, or like being a touch point for people to have a relationship with in order to like relationship into a brand and build that kind of brand loyalty, I think comes through athletes. And I think athletes are a stronger touch point for that, even if I don't have as many followers as maybe some more influencer type people in the ski space. I know that my followers are very loyal and they trust what I say. And I think that that's really key in the longevity conversation. I think for me, looking at where I'm at in my career, there's a lot of insecurities of how long it can keep going, because I do get faced a lot with, like, I've had multiple brands say, we're just looking for the next Amy. We just want the new you. Like, can you find us another you? And I'm like, what? I'm still here. Still got 2 legs, still skiing great. Like, what's the problem? Like,
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard not to feel insecure about that. And I've seen a couple of my peers recently, like, very officially retire as professional skiers. And for me, I don't see that as my plan or path, partly because I never want to buy skis. Let's be clear. That sounds crazy to me. But also just like, I think that there's a way where even as I age, even if I'm not chasing best female performance, opening seg of TGR, even if those things are maybe not the current goal of my career, I know I still influence people to purchase ski equipment, and I will continue to do so. I've started doing a lot of these like in-person ski camps, which people love. Like, I did a all women's camp at Palisades Tahoe this last year, and that was a really cool experience and also a great revenue generator that, like, I'm exploring. And I think just looking into the next phase of my career, I do want to do more things that I thought maybe I'd do back when I thought a ski career was impractical and impossible, which is how I felt for like the first 7 years of my career. And then I was finally like, okay, it is actually working. But so more producing projects that aren't necessarily about me. And I've been doing a lot more like hosting and on camera work. And so things where, I'm still in the space, I'm still adding value. I'm still, have a touch point with consumers for different brands, but also exploring, I think as an athlete, maybe you can relate to this. Like, there gets a point where I don't want to only rely on my body. I want to use my brain. I want to use these other skills. I still, unfortunately, am also super driven in skiing. I think one kind of toxic trait of most athletes is I don't think any athlete is going to get to a point where they're like, okay, I'm actually satisfied. I feel like I did my best and ready to move on. Like, you have to basically have some screws loose. In my opinion, there's something kind of weird with your brain if you decide to become a professional athlete of any sort. And like, a piece of that is certainly narcissism, right? Like, you have to have a layer of that to just believe that it's reasonable to kind of take this pretty wild life path, right? And you have to be really focused on yourself, and it is, no matter what kind of athlete you are, it's a selfish endeavor. Maybe team sports is a little bit different, but like in the world of action sports, like there's a pretty strong selfish streak going on. And I think as I get older, like that, like I'm never going to be like, you know what, God, I really just nailed, God, all the goals are checked and I'm psyched and I just want to have a baby and fucking chill. Like that's not, there's too much of our personalities that are too like closely linked to like addicts, basically,
Yeah.
like kind of healthy addict behavior. And so to me, like I've done the self-reflection to like know that about myself and know I'm not going to feel that way. So try to like plan for this next step, knowing that like I am never going to feel ready to hang it up. And it's going to be really hard to even distance myself. And it's really hard to even in a public space say, I don't still want opening seg of TGR, because I do. Like if that call comes, I want that, you know? And I don't think I'm ever going to not want that. I think even when I'm 60 years old, I'm still going to be like, God, I wish I had that. But just having this ability to see myself reasonably as an athlete and like almost again get back to that compartmentalization, like, okay, this is my brain and it works like this. And this is why I've been able to do what I've been able to do. There's also a part of my soul that wants different things. There's the reality of, you know, wanting secure lifestyles, being a woman, wanting to have kids at some point. Okay, how do I like work with this brain I know I have and create a system that's going to like allow that to happen and still like, you know, I don't know. It's almost like I have to like literally like jump out of my own skin so many times in this life and just see myself as like the specimen I am for why I'm here and what the pros and cons of that are, and then what my benefit is to like keep this dream alive. I don't know,
Yeah.
that I feel like that got very far away from your question.
Hey, that's what we're here for. That's the reality of this whole thing, and we are truly just trying to keep the dream alive. And I think you've done so much to really just think about all the things that you've learned through this process and all of the doors that it's opened up and all the future paths that you could potentially walk based on the experiences and the skills that you've picked up over this career. I mean, I think that's the thing that's so interesting, and to have more than one lane. I mean, I've seen a lot of athletes who, when their deals have been done, they've just had to start, back at the beginning
Over.
again.
Yeah.
And I think you set yourself up where I believe that both you and I could do what we're doing kind of indefinitely based on the relationships that we have with our audiences and communities, based on the knowledge that we have, based on the everything else that we've learned along the way. And I think that's really the thing that a lot of people, especially those athletes, are missing, is that yeah, it's frustrating to you that it's not enough to be just good at your sport, but also you're missing the opportunity to have like personal development and skill development in a new area. And actually, there are people that are willing to subsidize it on your behalf. Those brands want you to develop in those ways because it's valuable to them, but you're also going to get a lot out of that. And what you have here is just such a perfect example of that. So.
Maybe the best way to think of it is like this equal parts like creativity and strategy,
Mhm.
you know, because you kind of have to put the effort in to come up with the strategy and be savvy, and then also be willing to be creative to like think of a new way or avenue of it.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
hard. It's also like easier said than done. I think it's also hard as an athlete, like aging gracefully as an athlete, no matter how you identify gender wise. There's a lot of pressure to, I think we're also like what you're doing. You don't have an example of cyclists in the past that have had this kind of career. Like you are paving the way. And I think that a lot of athletes in my generation, you know, there's not in skiing, there's not a great system for like legacy athletes, you know? Like if you're not almost dying and making people like really psyched about that, then you're worthless. And it's like, okay, we're working on how to have that different, you know? And there's some examples in my sport. I think Chris Davenport is one of them. Darren Rawls is one of them. There's, you know, Ingrid Backstrom's trying to really show this like longevity kind of legacy ski career post children and all these things. But I think to me it feels a little daunting being like, well, no one's ever done it and maybe I should just retire and I don't know. But then also like, okay, but maybe I can create a new path
Yeah.
and like show a new way. And I'm sure like you must relate to that feeling of like you're not necessarily following some recipe, right?
Yep. Yeah, my mindset has always been if opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. And I really resonate with that idea of like forging a new path for people to follow. I mean, there's no gatekeeping in my world. I try to share as much as I possibly can. This podcast being a great example of that, you know? And can we introduce new ideas? Can we do new things? What level of education can we share with the world so that they can follow what we're doing, and what opportunities will that create?
But this
Um,
podcast has helped me in that way too. Like even just a episode I listened to recently just about starting to call myself a content creator instead of an influencer. And I'm like, God, that feels so much more comfy for me. I'm going to do that. Like, I'm going to change this wording in my stupid athlete deck that I'm re-editing for the 17th time, like just, um, yeah, the community part of it. And that's a big part of it too.
this has been such a fun conversation, and I feel like you and I could have probably like another 3 hours with this discussion. But we typically end on a segment called BPC, which is brand product content. And I'd love to hear from you, what's out there for you, maybe a piece of content or a product or brand, anything that you're super pumped on right now.
Well, aside from my big dumb hat collection you see back here for summer, my basic bitch summer, my big dumb hat collection. No, that can't be my product. I think for me, in this current moment, I just want to highlight the work that I've been doing and really currently ingrained in doing with Protect Our Winters. We have it's been like an all hands on deck situation with everything that's been going on with kind of the future of our public lands being in jeopardy with some of the stuff that's going on in Washington right now. And I have to say, I've been so inspired by the way the outdoor community has been able to unify and rally around this issue. The film I made, The Hypocrite, was all about talking about the potential of the outdoor industry. 181 million people participate in outdoor rec every year just in the US.
The outdoor state, right?
The outdoor state is what we call it at POW. And that's it's kind of been this concept that at POW we've all really believed in, and I've seen tremendous potential. Like if you compare that 180 million some odd people, like the NRA has 4 million active members and they drive policy in this country. So like I'm like, you guys, if we just can get on the same page, like we can really work together on this can be a nonpartisan issue. This can be a place where we can rise above and yeah, protect all these things we love. Yeah, protect humanity, but also protect this massive industry that's a $1.2 trillion industry is the outdoor economy in the US. And I've just been like blah 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 outdoor state, making a film, panels, interviews, and in this last big push around this kind of public lands protection, we saw it happen. And
So cool.
there's a lot right now that if you're an environmentalist, to be concerned about and not happy about. But I want to take this chance to celebrate, like, as much as there's parts of what's going on in our world right now that are really concerning and stressful to me, I am drawing so much hope and inspiration by the turnout this community had for our public lands. Like, it's so weird for me to say that I'm hopeful in this moment. I think a lot of people would be like, oh God, she's taking crazy pills. But God, I was impressed by the outdoor state. And it felt so good to see that this thing we've been trying and trying to make happen, it worked. We got the sale of public lands. We changed policy in our country to protect outdoor recreation, and we did it together, and people felt strong enough and safe enough to speak up that would never speak up. So I just I don't know, just yeah, shout out to the work that POW is doing, and I guess just a celebration at a time where a lot of people probably aren't celebrating, but I can't. It just the hope it floods me with is really cool, and it makes me feel like a little rejuvenated. For I feel like I've given a lot to the outdoor state cause over the last couple of years, and so to see it work, I'm just beyond psyched.
Big shout out to Pow. Our episode with Aaron Sprague. Actually, to be honest with you, that entire episode, my brain was just melted as she was speaking. I couldn't even come up with good
Yeah,
questions because I was just like blown away the entire
yeah.
time. She's so awesome. And the work she's done, the work that Pow has done, that everyone involved has done is so inspirational.
Well, it's just the potential of our community. Once you realize that you have power and it's untapped, I think it's a mind blowing experience.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I'm gonna share a piece of content that kind of ties into the conversation that we had today. I just got to see Smith Optics has put on this event earlier this week with Payson McElvin,
Yeah.
good friend of ours, good friend of the pod. He just released the third I don't know, episode, if you want to call it that, of a series he does called Crossing. So he did Crossing Iceland, Crossing Tasmania, and then he just did Crossing New Zealand.
So cool.
And this is a project that he puts together kind of on an annual basis with his partners. And he's got a good team that's now shooting and editing. This was the longest of the three, and it was such a cool story. And I think that's a great thing for athletes to be thinking about. Of, Payson puts it on his YouTube channel. I think this new episode might end up on maybe Red Bull TV or something, one of his partner channels. But the way that you think about it as an athlete doesn't have to be, he's still a competitive athlete, but he's still capable to have this plus one. And should his or when his, racing career winds down, he's now going to have this other asset that he can put even more energy into in this series. And so I think it's an interesting thing to look at what he's done with Crossing and think about, you don't have to come up with a brand new idea every year. What if you just had like a thing that you could just keep building on and stacking? Like, okay, what's a project that I could do that I could then do it in another place and travel to another place? I think that's one of the cool things about sports is that the storyline, there's always like an easy way to tie in the risk, the reward, the struggle, the strife, and building a story off of a goal or a task doesn't necessarily have to be competitive only. You can compete with yourself, or you can have a concept that works in a number of different places. And now all of a sudden, one idea turns into basically like 10 episodes or whatever.
I mean,
Uh,
this series component is brilliant and something we didn't touch on, but yeah, that is really the way to uh, find longevity is if you can figure out an idea where you can keep doing it over and over again. And you don't need an original idea, you just need to execute. Like, there's only what, 10 ideas in the whole world or whatever. Like, every movie you see, there's like 10 movies we all watch over and over again. So it's just finding a way it can fit for you. And then if you can make it something that can build and create a series, like that, to me, is the magic ticket in this moment. And again, advice to myself right in this moment when I'm going to get off this call and go work on a pitch deck.
Perfect. Well, Amy, this was honestly everything I hoped it was going to be. When we had that first call to prepare for TrailCon, I was like, oh, this has got to be a podcast. We
uh,
definitely need to have a much deeper conversation. And wow, thank you so much for the time today. And I honestly, like, we have so much more stuff that we barely even got to talk about that I think would be worth diving into in maybe a future episode. But thank you again for being here.
yeah, thank you for having me on. It was awesome and big fan of the podcast and just stoked to be here.